Welcome to Real Feels, the podcast that invites people to be public with their private persona. In a world where many of us constantly curate a version of ourselves on social media, I'd like to take some time to find out who we are, who we aim to be, and the space in between. I'm your host, Brad Gage. Actor, writer, and friend Lee Newton is having a challenging moment. It's one of heartbreak as well as new beginnings. What you should know going into this podcast is that after almost 2 years of working with her comedy group, the Valleyfolk, on a vibrant and funny YouTube channel, as well as the NBC comedy TV show Bring the Funny, Lee was surprised to learn she had been terminated from the company she helped create. Today, we chatted about empowerment, loss, resilience, comedy, and lessons she has learned being a woman in the entertainment industry. It's some deep stuff, it's some vulnerable stuff, and I'm so grateful that she decided to be here with me in this moment right now. Well, first off, how are you doing right now? How are you feeling in your heart right now?
I've had an interesting day. I've had a rough couple days. Oh my God, I'm going to cry already. Great, Brad. Thanks a lot. Whoa. Fuck, Brad.
Nobody's asking you the big questions. How are you? How are you?
No, I've had like a rough weekend. A weekend happened where like there was a triggering situation where it like kind of reopened some wounds that were pretty rough. And so that's the reality, is like that's been a consistent thing. I'll be wonderful. I'll be great. And then something will come along and it will like full on trigger heavy things and heavy meltdowns. And the thing that I've been like working through with therapy and everything, and I mean, that's been consistent for years, but the thing that I've been working through the most is like trying to recognize those things when they come up as not so severely triggering, as like getting in control and getting behind those things a little bit, if that makes any sense.
No, absolutely. You're witnessing them.
But yeah, I mean, really, it's like, it's a journey. It's been a very intense, and there'll be days, I'm not going to say weeks yet, because there hasn't been any of those yet where I've been like, I'm doing great. Like, but there's been days of just like wonderful greatness. And then there's been moments of just like full on kicking into just, severe tragedy and trauma.
What does that look like? What kicks in? What do you mean by that?
So I am a person with a past of trauma. Like, I'm a person that has had multiple instances in my life of like serious shit has happened to me. And so when something, like life upheaving comes along, it can kind of kick you into this powerlessness, helplessness that kind of makes you regress back into those other places of trauma. And so you try not to like think about those as well. Yeah. And that's like even more, I mean, it really is like, for lack of a better term, it's like a Pandora's box where you're just like, now I am reopening every wound that I've ever had because of this powerlessness and this helplessness and this frustration, So what it looks like for me is wallowing. Like, I don't know any other way of saying it, of just being in like a really shitty place and being hard on myself and being overwhelmed and being mainly just overwhelmed by emotion and frustration. And again, like this powerlessness has been kind of the name of the game of just like, with everything that happened, there was so much out of my control that I couldn't control anything. Right. And so that was such a frustrating thing of just like trying to find instances in my life where I can get power back, where I can gain traction, where I can do that. If that makes any sense.
What are some ways that you are working on getting your power back?
I'm writing a lot. I'm writing so much. And it's great and it's wonderful. And I was telling Delman, my love, my
Andrew
life.
Andrew Delman. Your husband.
My husband, Andrew Delman. My husband, Andrew Delman. But I was telling him, I was like, when all this happened, it was truly such a shock and such a earth-shattering, axis-smashing thing that kind of trying to figure out myself again a little bit. Like, kind of trying to figure out, like, what do I want? What is me? What is this? Why am I doing the things that I'm doing? Is that important to me anymore? And for a second, it really wasn't important to me anymore. For a second, I literally was like, I'm gonna go.
What wasn't important to you?
Performing, acting, creating. Like, any of that
the
wasn't...
career and the life that
I've built.
Your
like
entire time.
The journey that I've been on in the 34 years of my life. And the
success you've had, yes.
And the success I had. There was a moment there where I literally was like, I'm done. Like, if this is what all like success brings, if this is what any of this mild success, by the way, but it's like, if this is what any of this brings, I don't want any part of it. Like a part of me truly was like, I could go and live in a hut in a tree house and like, I don't know, maybe I could perform water births for women. I don't make spoon art.
A lovely and honorable job.
Lovely, honorable.
But to get to that far down the road,
Sure.
I mean, talk a little bit about like how it gets there. How do you feel where that spiral and where your head goes?
I think it like really comes from such a place of you work so hard, you invest so deeply into something, and you put every piece of your heart into something, and then for that to be kind of taken away, and then for it to be ripped away. So again, lack of your power and lack of your control. For me, I was like, well, I've seen what success brings, and I've seen what like being on the road to this journey brings, and I, you know, if it's going to cause this much heartbreak, if it's going to cause, and I've had in this industry, I've had truly so many instances of heartbreak where, I mean, some really good ones are literally watching a show that you're like, I remember when I tested for that, though, you know, where you're like, or like seeing your friends on stage in a position where you didn't get voted in, or like literally being the phone call away from your life having been changed. And that's happened to me so many times in this industry. Really, it's happened so like to the point where I have a joke now where I literally say, if it's between me and a girl, I congratulate her. Like I'm literally just like, hey, I just want you to know you're gonna get this. How do I know? Track record.
But also, do you give yourself moments to appreciate the wins?
I do.
Yeah.
I really do. And there's like certain things that, you know, to say that I'm not proud of myself is impossible. Like I am very proud of myself. And if anything, I'm proud of myself for still doing this, for still being here when I have friends that have done it and they're like living in, you know, Idaho, and you're like, yeah. And there's absolutely, I used to judge that. I used to be like, they gave up. And now I'm like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Congratulations on finding your bliss. Like, really, that's such a...
What made you realize that this industry that we have been taught to hold above everything isn't actually as important as it is? Do you feel like there was a moment where that happened for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it happens where you see other people living out like honest, real, you know, deep lives, and they're happy, and you know, I see nothing wrong with following whatever it is to your thing. And I think it actually took a series of heartbreaks. I think it took like a series of getting so close to that precipice and then not getting something and being like, yeah, like I know that there's more than this. For me, I'm still doing this because I truly have zero other skills. Like, but you know, it's like, I mean, I'm sure I have
other skills, but also, I mean, I'm sure you have learned so much, you've grown so much.
Yeah.
What would you say is one of your greatest lessons that you've learned?
Now I'm in a place of like, sticking up for myself, like really like not trying to fit in. And that's kind of been something that has happened where I've had that happen consistently in my life. Like even during Groundlings, I remember there was one sketch that I pitched every single week for a half a year. For a half a year, I pitched it, and the director at the time was like, this is never going to see the light of day. And it became like a long-going joke where they're like, well, is Lee going to pitch this sketch? And I would every single week, I would pitch it to whatever different reformation I made it, or like, you know, reformed sketch, and every single week. And then finally, one day, she broke, and she was like, fine, put it up, go and do it. And I did it, and it was wonderful, and it murdered, and I knew it would. And so it's like something like that was one of those things. That was one of the life lessons of like, no, I know what I can do. Like if it's not something that you see funny, or if it's not something that you get, that's fine. But I know me. Like, and throughout all of this, I have known myself more than anything. I've been taught a lot of different things about myself, and I'm learning like, I have cowered on certain things. I have wanted to fit in on things, so I haven't spoken up. I have, you know, just not been true to myself, for lack of a better term, you know, and that has caused like things where I didn't necessarily get the credit that I needed to get, or didn't necessarily get the respect that I needed to get. Whether or not that was something that was capable of giving, I don't know. Yeah. But I know that I would have felt better about myself, and I would have felt better about this whole journey if I would have just been like, no, why didn't I just stand up for myself? Why didn't I just like, put that foot forward? And now it's kind of one of those of like, you can bet your ass that that'll never happen again.
Why do you think you didn't?
I think it's a lot of it is really like pure trying to fit in. A lot of it is like, well, if you want to get real with it,
I do.
Please. It's a woman thing. It really is. It's like you're kind of forced into a position of caretaker, of nurturer, of easygoing. Because if you're not easygoing, you're immediately a bitch, and that's the truth. If you're not going with the flow, then you're a bitch. And so that means if you have opinions on anything, that means if you have, notes, if you have any different opposing idea, you can be formed into a bitch. And that label is so toxic in this industry, and I mean, I love, like, as much as we love to say, like, Tina Fey has this quote of like, you can call me a bitch, but bitches get shit done. Like, as much as we love that, like, beautiful quote, it's like, but then people have to be around her, and people spread weird shit about how she's just so nasty. And it's like, I don't know a single successful woman nowadays that probably hasn't had that bitch label. Like, I promise you, I honestly cannot name any successful woman, and I swear they've had a bitch label on them, for half their lives. And that's a weird thing, because I know there's certain things of, if I was a man, there would not be an issue with me speaking up or saying things.
What are some of the adaptations you've had to take on so that you can maneuver yourself through kind of a male-dominated community?
I think I have had to there's been so many instances. I could name 15 off the top of my head that I have truly not spoken up. And there's been instances of like, that's an uncomfortable scenario. That's just inappropriate. Like, like things like that, that you have to kind of like, I wrote this one thing, I remember ages ago, and I hate the term, oh, they just can't take a joke. I hate it, because it's also like, you don't know whatever that means to you, you have no idea what that means to someone else. Like,
whose
you really
joke?
Whose joke?
It's like that's just your joke.
It's your joke.
Just because it's not funny to them doesn't mean they're wrong.
Yeah, I mean, they're not like
blaming
showing
the audience.
someone else's work material and then being like, well, you don't like it, you can't take a joke. No, it's your joke. It's like that you can't take a joke. And then there was a really beautiful, and I'm gonna botch it because I don't remember her name, but she had this viral tweet, and I loved it because I was like, oh my God, that's happened so many times in my life, of someone will say like, oh, like one guy told her, she was an intern, and he told her she had a really good phone sex voice. And he was like, and she was like, okay. And he goes, oh, it was a joke. And she goes, well, explain the joke to me. And like it was one of those where
Let's
she
play
said
this
it like
out.
stopped him in his tracks, and just like, oh, explain the joke to me.
I mean, it's similar
to
a cat caller saying something and a woman going, okay. Yeah, fuck me now.
And he's like,
right. They're not
being
gonna.
A real asshole
it's not
about
gonna,
this. No, it's never gonna pan out.
Yeah.
And so that's like, it was a consistent phrase of, you can't take a joke, was something that was so frustrating to me. Of like, God, you can't take a joke. It's like, no, it's your joke that, and it's not that I can't take it. I respect so many different forms of comedy. There is truly trash comedy that I know is so offensive to other people that I find hysterical. And I know that it's mine, that it's to myself. But I also know that there are certain things that happen that you're like, it's what it means to you is not what it means to someone else.
Is there an example that you could kind of play out a little bit? If there an up-and-coming female comedian was like, what's something I should look out for? Do you have a scenario that you can think of that would be helpful?
I mean, well, the thing I would say now more than anything is, like, if you wrote something or if you did something and someone tries to take credit, like, speak up. As much as it like is a pain in your ass, because every time that I have spoken up, I haven't regretted it. It's been very uncomfortable.
Right.
But I don't know. But also the opposite side of it is going home and resenting the shit out of that entire room, resenting the shit out of the scenario, out of your life, out of your everything. That's been one of those where I've done it. I've done had the awkward thing of like, actually, that was my idea that I pitched you, that you now took, and da-da-da-da-da, and it's like, oh, oh, okay, and like,
How is that received?
depends on the situation. It's been received super poorly before, of like people dudes that are really like uncomfortable about it and super have egos wrapped up. But the thing I will say is, after that instance, they're a little bit more aware of, like, is this someone else's idea, or at least giving me credit in a situation, or at least, doing that. I've also, and this is a weird thing of, it's way more helpful when I've been in a room before where I've pitched an idea or pitched a joke, some other guy says it, and then another guy will be like, Lee just said that.
Right.
And those are those moments where you're like, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, thank you so much, companion. Like, thank you very much. And that
probably came from a woman who they respected,
guaranteed.
Telling them,
guaranteed,
this is what happens, and they're aware. I mean,
it's not them sitting there just going, oh, well, wait a minute. No, it's probably from another instances where maybe they got called out on something, or where they saw someone else get called out and go, oh shit, like, this is real,
Through all this is like, okay, I see all these kind of inherent problems, and so, why are men saying these things?
Yeah. I mean,
why do you think they say stuff like that?
Well, I mean,
why do you think they take ideas from women?
I really think it's an ego thing. Yeah. I think it's that, if I'm going to be honest, there's like, I have my own husband that I have to like sit there and pick apart in a beautiful way. And I think one of the most positive things about marriage is that it teaches you so much about another person. For me, it's another gender. For me, it's like another gender that I get to dissect and be like, oh shit, like as I'm sitting here going like, the world is catered to men, it's also catered towards a certain type of man, which he is not. And so that's an even more like frustrating battle, and even more,
what type of man do you think it's catered more?
An alpha male. Like, it's catered towards an alpha male. And like, even with all this Me Too stuff that came along, Del and I would have very long, arduous conversations about like, the world and how this is the truth of it. And there are so many instances, and I could name 30 different instances in my life where things have crossed the line and things have been, totally inappropriate and abusive and etc. And he couldn't fathom it because he's not that guy. And so that was something that was incredibly, I wonder if you had the same thing, where it's like, that's something so hard to wrap your head around, because you're like, I could never.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, you could never.
You don't know until you know.
You don't know until you know.
And I think that's the triggering reaction for a lot of men when they hear about Me Too, or even just the phrase toxic masculinity. All this stuff is very triggering, because they don't think that it applies to them, and even if it does. But also, for a lot of the Me Too stuff, people are like, what?
Yes.
And that's okay. It is okay, because you're not being ignorant. But what's important, and I feel very lucky in this, is I have had strong female role models.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of men who have not. And so that's my privilege. And so all of this conversation is about, I think the phrasing that people use a lot is like women finding their voices.
Sure.
But that's not what's happening.
No.
Women have always had their voice. People are actually listening.
It's being
to
heard.
It.
Women being
it's finally
heard
being
is
listened
truly
to.
that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, and even changing that vocabulary is a totally new way of thinking of it for so many men.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's just hard to do, but like sharing with men that it will be more helpful to listen and research,
and
just
also
like
just
you would
like
with anything.
Again, a true reality of the situation, where I think that was the reason why that was such a shocking, beautiful movement, was because there are these instances where men go like, it can't be that. And it's those men that you need so badly to be like your allies and your, like your companions in this, because those are the men that could never do something like that. So it's even more shocking when they go like, when 15 out of 20 women in their lives have had moments or instances of that, that's something so incredible that you just go, okay, well then if I have to be a person that leads a change.
Yes.
And so that's something. But I remember, Del and I having these long talks about it, and it was truly something that he couldn't wrap his mind around. And I loved that about him, because, part of me was just like, thank God that isn't something you can wrap your mind about. And like, thank God that that's something that is so foreign to you and so insane to you that that's the reason I married you, is because you're not an ounce of that person, you know, because I've been in rooms where he's literally, you know, been someone that has lifted me up so intensely, or we've been in writers' rooms where I've said something and he'll literally would just be like, oh no, Lee already fleshed that out. Like, and that's been such an amazing moment. And even throughout all this madness that just happened, that was the thing that kept going back in my head, is just like this person that I found that was such a support and such like a warrior for me, for lack of a better term, like such a warrior for me. When I couldn't be, when I was like melted, when I was done, he was sitting there just like fully like, I got you, like, you know, I don't know, riding my horse into battle as I'm like strapped to the back, you know? So that was something that was so beautiful and amazing. But to the other side of the coin, like what you were talking about, him growing up in his world where men are pitted against each other, men are only boiled down to their successes, men are only, if you're sensitive, you're weak, if you're this, you're this. So that's a difficult thing of like why men are like that, is because they've been told that this success, that ego in self is the only thing that breeds success in your life. So they fight super hard for it. And then they've been bred as fighters. And then bred as fighters isn't the right way to say it, but they have been
to a certain degree.
To a certain degree, yes. It's like they've been pushed as fighters in their life. So they have this fight in them that is so real, which is why on the opposite side, when women are, you know, kind of been in this maternal position and in this nurturing position and caretaking position, when they speak up or when they have a moment where they are firm or, you know, succinct or what can be perceived as rude, then it's even more on the opposite side. And it's just this, I mean, it's society. Did we just say we blame society? Is that it in a nutshell?
Right.
We say? Again, growing up, I've been so very lucky that the men in my life, my brother is a feeler. He is an empath. He is, I mean, he's a singer-songwriter, for the love of God, you know, but like
you got to be a little sensitive.
He's a feeler. It's like he doesn't know anything. I mean, he was immersed in 3 women. He's surrounded by mother and 2 sisters in the middle. And then my dad is a pastor and a lover and a walking, bleeding heart. And, you know, and I've been very fortunate. I mean, again, sports, no. You know, like any sort of, I remember like all of it. Like we'd be on Father's Day, we're always screwed because we're like, he doesn't like any of these things. Like he just wants a hug.
What does he like?
Hug coupon. Like he'd love a hug coupon. He'd love a hug coupon and some like candy.
Yeah.
You know, like, and that was it consistently. When I look at the line of caretaking, it really was a 50-50 split. And I was so grateful to have that because, you know, I did have this father that was so invested in my life. And I remember bawling to him and I remember him crying for me. And I remember those moments of, you know, where normally they always send the mother in to do the emotional work. And that was not. No, he was rebuilding every emotional wall with me. He was, you know, he was there. Like that was a real thing. And so I'm very grateful to have that. I know I'm lucky because that is not the instance and not the case for everyone.
What kind of pastor? What
He's a non-denominational pastor.
Yes. How was it Christian mainly? How was it growing up with kind of religion being a part of
being a very big part of it?
Your life, yeah.
You know, hindsight is always very nice. I think in the thick of it was frustrating. I think in the thick of it was you have a lot of eyes on you, and it's very like you can't in the times where you are truly trying to form who you are and what you are and push every boundary you can. Normally you just have your parents' set of eyes on you, but I had an entire town's set of eyes on me. So that was frustrating.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned that to them. I've literally said, you know, that's a very frustrating thing for me of like this, and also being immersed in something that wasn't necessarily a choice to begin with, you know, like wasn't that. But also the thing I do know is that his beliefs and his, you know, his thoughts and who he is and his constant like seeking of guidance has led him to be the wonderful human that he is, and also to be the father that he was to me has like put him in this moral code that has set him up to be a wonderful person in my life, and also who I am, you know, like my pervasive faith and my pervasive hope and my pervasive journey of light and discovery and laughter would not have been existent without that, without him consistently being like, there's a higher power, someone has your back, like, you know, someone has a divine journey for you and you are chosen. And that is something that I think is pretty special to have growing up, because at least you feel like you're not hopeless.
Yeah,
you know?
and you're not alone.
And you're not alone.
How often are you tapping into that? Do you have any spiritual practices?
I do.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I pray every single day.
Yeah.
I do. And it's in different forms now that I've like learned through meditation and things, and now certain things like that, and even like journaling is a weird form of prayer. You know. I was telling Del, like, when all this happened, I felt like I lost myself so viciously, you know, like, and not to the point of like, I don't know who I am anymore, but it was like, I don't know what I want. And there's this beautiful quote that our friend always had of like, no one gives a shit what you're doing. They give a shit why you're doing it. And that was like such a thing that I was like, I don't know why I'm doing this anymore. And that was like a real moment of like, do I want to if I don't know why, you know? And so I like even went online. It was before anyone knew anything that had happened. And when I was in the thick of like lawyers. And so I asked people, I was like, when was the last time you were moved? Because I couldn't put my finger on it. And when I grew up, like I grew up in Yosemite, so that helps of like being humbled and moved.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
You know, like that. It's impossible.
You're
not
living
to,
among
you go outside,
the beauty
and you're
of
like, great,
yes.
I'm nothing and I'm everything at the same time. But I grew up in Yosemite, and that was I remember as a child, that was consistent for me of like feeling spiritually moved and feeling like, you know, God, regardless of what you believe it is, was there and present. I like to think of it as a female Sigourney Weaver, like Ripley. Like that's my God.
Wow.
Consistently underestimated, as most women are. You know, like we always, I think if we talk about God, we're like, oh, like whatever, you know, like they can't. And it's like, yeah, you know. Like if they are,
you
what
feel
they
like
think
people
they are.
underestimate
I think
God?
they do constantly, or like just like, you know, do the thing of like, well, it's not something I'm gonna deal with.
Sure.
I think, or you go to it with the other side of like, please let me win the lottery and fix this car tire for me. But I think a lot of times people underestimate, you know, like what the plan has held for them. I mean, that was the thing I learned the most through all of this is like, because I had no control, because I was so out of control of that, I had to kind of sit there and go like, okay, there's a lesson in this. Okay, I have to learn from this because that's the only control I have in the situation is like, what can I learn from this? What can I pull back? What can I move forward knowing from this? How I felt about the situation was so different than obviously how others felt about it. So I'm sitting here saying, okay, you know what? I have to move forward from this. I have to move forward with my hands not tied behind my back. I have to know that, you know, things weren't what they seemed. And that was probably the most heartbreaking thing for me. And so moving forward from that, I had to literally make a decision of like, I can't be alone in this. This has been divinely set up to move me forward in a direction that I wasn't expecting to go into and wasn't wanting to go into, but I have to move forward in this journey because this is literally what life is telling me and what the universe and what everything is putting in my path of like, this is a massive roadblock and there's no way to get around it. So we changed directions, you know, and that's just the only thing that I could literally sit here and go like, okay,
right.
That's the only thing I knew is that like, this is not something I can fix. So I have to continue on in a totally different way. And that has to be okay. Yeah. And that also has to mean that I had a weird moment where I was in Washington with friends for a beautiful wedding. And a friend turned to me and he's very like, he's very timid and he doesn't say much. But when he says stuff, you're always like, God damn it. You know, and those people, you're just like, oh, son of a. And he just looked at me and he was like, I think all of this is really protecting you. I think someone's protecting you from something. And that was how I was just like, that was such a release for me of like, I'm being protected from whatever journey that could have led to. Yes,
absolutely.
I'm being protected. And that's been a thing.
It's happening now because it maybe would anyways later. And who knows? Yeah.
And who knows?
What is the lesson that you think you're being taught?
Really trusting myself, I think has been the biggest thing of like, I will say out of, there's a lot of things that I suffer from in this world. Anxiety is one. It's a massive one for me. Like Della and I talk about our different anxieties because our anxieties look so different. I have an anxiety of, like needing to be something for people that I don't know if I can live up to. Or I have an anxiety of, and that comes from being a child that has had, I had 4 open heart surgeries as a kid. And so I was kind of chosen.
Only 4?
Only 4. It seems like I want an odd number just to make it cute,
Jeez.
It'll be there. It'll be down the road. From a very young age, I kind of had this weird, like, special label on my head, which was lovely and wonderful. But at the same time, it doesn't push you into any sense of normalcy. Like,
sure.
You can't just go and I felt like I, from a very young age, had to do great things. And so that's a little...
Because you survived that.
Because you did all this because you worked so hard.
Yes, yeah.
And part of the way I worked so hard was like, it's a lot of pressure. It's like, literally to just be like, oh, and then she went in and lived in the Pacific Northwest and no one ever heard from her again. And like, that's not, again, I was like a miracle child for my entire life. So I had this label on my head of this. And so there's that anxiety of like feeling like I need to live up to that or live up to performing or live up to even being who I am on the internet or something like that. That's a weird anxiety, but that's something I suffer from. I've never suffered from like knowing who I am and knowing like, and that's been a thing that's kind of plagued me a lot in my life too, of like, if I find something unfunny, I'll tell you. It's like if there's notes on something, you'll know. Or if this is not something that I want to do, you will also know. And that's like a consistent thing of like, I know who I am. I know what I hate the term brand. I don't know. Persona.
Persona.
Yeah, I mean, like I know who,
brand.
Really
there's a level of consumerism
brand.
To that.
It's so
that
gross.
Is but
I know it, and I know what I want, and I know what I bring to the world, and I know it very well, and that's something that I know so viciously in my bones, and it's been a detriment before, and it's also been a real, wonderful joy and peace and treasure before too.
What's interesting that I've realized recently, because I can be a pretty sensitive person.
Yes.
I try to keep my ego very low, especially in creative situations. But I've learned that if you cannot handle someone speaking their mind without taking it too personally, that is more about you than it is about them.
Yes.
You can choose to disagree in a loving way.
Yeah.
And have empathy and find an understanding. Or if you can't find understanding, go, well, like, I just disagree and whatever.
And that's it.
Like, we can't do anything about that, so let's move on. Yeah. And it does not need to be taken so personally. Easier said than done.
So much easier
but
said than done.
But it is a lot. It's. I keep asking the question why when it relates to the elements of ego, toxic masculinity, and just general sexism.
Sure.
And I think it all roots back to a lack of authentic power for everyone. I mean, that's a problem. Anytime you feel something that somebody hurts you.
Yeah.
And I think it's becoming more popular phrase, like no one can make you feel a certain way.
Sure.
But they can sure do things but you do have control over your emotions, how you deal with things. And for me, just helping people to do things in a more loving way, ask themselves if they can be more loving, and not assume the worst.
Yes.
And so it's just interesting to hear this from you, because it is such a consistent problem, I'm sure, or a challenge for you, right? To be like, I am doing the same thing as men do.
Yeah.
And am getting in trouble for it.
Yeah. I'm getting different results. And it's also, again, it's...
Yeah. And I don't want to make men feel bad, they're the enemy too.
100% neither.
That's why we have to ask why. Yeah, right.
But
I know
it's
you
also
don't.
Literally 1,000,000,000% neither do it. Because again, in my life, I've been very fortunate that I've had wonderful, wonderful humans in my life that have proved every aspect of that wrong. And really, it's even just one of those of just like, that's just one of the many battles that I've had in this industry. Right. Like really, like that's what's one. So sad. I know, yes. It's like that, like, let's get into body image issues. It's like, let's get into everything. There's so many different things to unpack in this bag of tragedy. But it's like, you know, that is something that is consistent and
bag of tragedy.
You know, it's like this bag of tragedy.
Yeah.
That is something that is consistent that is something I know firsthand. And I can only speak to what I know firsthand because there's been other things that I know other women have. I've never had the journey of being overwhelmingly sexually attractive. And that is something that, like, again, I've had friends that have told me their stories that I can't relate to on any level, but my God, does it sound awful.
Well, and that's the thing that they, with age, lose their worth, lose their self-worth.
Yes.
Lose all of the sense of self. Oprah did a whole podcast show about
queen.
it.
She's my
She is. She's the reason this podcast exists.
I love her so much.
She's incredible.
I love her.
I'm going to see her in February.
What?
I'm going to see her in February.
A friend of
Spent
mine,
way too much money on it.
I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you.
Yeah.
A friend of mine recently had Oprah at her wedding, and by Oprah,
what?
No, just wait, because it was just a cardboard cutout, but it was perfect and it was perfection, and like she was in every photo, and it was so good because we were just like, we needed this to happen. And she was like up there. She was like maid of honor, like cardboard cutout of Oprah. And it was just perfect. And it was so beautiful. But there wasn't a single person in the crowd that wasn't like, what's with the Oprah? Everyone's like, we get it. She's our queen. We love her so much.
But she's a product of everything you're talking about. The resilience you have to have. I mean, body image issues, being a black woman on television.
Unreal.
And there's a reason why she's the queen. There's a reason why she's so good at what she does. And she put the work in and stayed strong and stayed resilient. And so, like, definitely, like, you have done that. And so how are you feeling right now? How far through the fire are you?
I think I'm
now.
I think I'm still getting charred. I'm still getting, you know, like ash is still raining down at times, and you're like, oh shit, ow. But I think I'm getting through the fire. And really, the thing that's been helping me the most has been like writing it all out. And it's kind of one of those things of a lot of people will be like, you have to tell the story about your heart. And I'm like, you know, and then it's like, you have to tell the story about all this adversity. I'm like, you know, like all these different things that are kind of your stories, you know, and so they feel very personal to you. And they feel like, you know, I remember years ago, I had some guy that was like just harping. And he was like, write a book, you have to write a book. And for me, it felt just like, I started writing it and I was like, oh, this is mine. Like, I don't think the world can know this about me, in the sense of like, just because it is so real and so raw and so yours.
Why do you think the world can't know these things about you?
Well, there's certain things of just like, there's a privacy factor that is real, that like, because there's so much systemic hurt in it. I don't necessarily love people that don't know the full truth of the reality, knowing little parts of it and assuming things about you. I don't know if that makes any sense. That was a really broad, vague way of saying just like... It sounds
like you're worried about people running around, taking your story and running away with it.
Yes, yeah, that, 100%. Because again, there's, you know, it's like, it's so personal. And even like, I have very close family members, and I remember my brother and I talked about this years ago of like, what my surgeries meant to him, or like something that was so different and so real and so like, I can't even begin to unpack that. Like, there's just those different things. And so when it's these really, really intense personal stories that I was like writing out, I remembered being like, I don't know if I want the world to know about this. I think the world can know I've been through shit and I've persevered. I think there's certain instances that the world can know. But when there's like really heavy darkness that you're like, I don't necessarily want the world knowing about that, because I don't want that to keep being brought up in my life.
Sure.
You know, if that makes any sense.
No,
like,
I'm sure. I'm going to guess, even with the situation with the Valleyfolk, this idea of story.
Yeah.
And people do take things one way or the other.
I mean, again, it was people, I mean, wrote these narratives that I was seeing was something that was just so far off and so insane, and nothing hurts worse than wanting to set records straight and wanting to say stories that you're like, not remotely, and you have no idea. And nothing is more frustrating than that. And I had to actively make a choice to literally be like, I cannot speak to any of this, because if I did, I would go hoarse. Like I would be voiceless. And there's so many instances where I felt like, I mean, like, we talk about clapbacks and there could have been 8 million of them, but it was one of those where like, I felt like I had to say what I needed to say. and I had to be honest about it. And that was the thing I was the most proud of myself of doing, was just being really real and authentic and just straightforward, and then literally actively making a choice of, there are a million things I could say to this, but I can't, because that it's been so eroding. And I was already, this is after a month of just devastation and heartbreak. And so to just go like, I can't, I just have to leave it behind, and I have to actively make a choice to move on with my life. And, you know, it's not like pick up the pieces. It's like literally learn how to do shit again. Also now with a little bit of piss and vinegar, you know, but
good.
But like
the piss and the vinegar are what make it all effervescent and attractive.
And it's just, but again, you're right. The narratives of that were being made were just, I was kind of blown away, because again, that's an instance of, you know, if you can't speak to every single angle of the story, which when I was writing a book, I couldn't speak to every single angle of the story, then I just think it's something that you don't even need to try. Like, that's something that's so interesting to me. And I know that people like talked about things, and I'm like, you haven't talked to me about anything. Or like, there's like a lot of different things that popped up, and it was just like, really, if, you know, no one knows. And so it's just like, it's conjecture. Conjecture is so disturbing. And that's happened a lot in my life, of like conjecture of why I am the way that I am. And even just coming forward and being like, oh, I've had 4 open heart surgeries. People take that into conjecture land. And it's not their fault. I think people want to know things.
Where would they take it?
Oh, they take it on to, of like, that's why she's so this, and that's why she can't. For years, it was like, that's why she doesn't have relationships. She can't let anyone in because she's in this. And I was like, no, I lived in LA, and it's a trash heap. Like, I lived in LA, and I had some pretty tragic boyfriends. Yeah. You know, also nice guys too. But
how do you maneuver that situation? I mean, going forward, you're faced with a situation where you want to control the narrative, or is it just one of those situations where you've learned to go, fuck it, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing?
That's the only thing I can do. I mean, it's there's this really cute little quote in recovery that they always say. It's so cute, but it's like, you are truly quotes. So cute. It's like adorable little kitty cat hanging on a wall. No, it's like you're powerless over people, places, and things. Yes. And that has been the journey that I have just been like, okay, like this is it in my life. And my dad has this really beautiful thing that he always says of like, if things can be a teachable moment, let them be a teachable moment. Yeah. And that's the truth, is like, if it's a teachable moment for whoever is getting the lesson, then that's the reality of it. And so for me, I try and look at things now of like, okay, is there a lesson in this? Why am I getting so hurt by this, or so perturbed by this, or so frustrated by this? A lot of it is because I can't speak the truth that I want to speak, or I can't say the things that I want to say. But a lot of it is also just because it hurts your fucking feelings. But really now it's gotten to the point, and especially if you're going to live the life of online, or if you're going to live that life of letting people in at all, which I don't ever not want to do. I know that's a weird thing to say, but I mean, I've been in, there was a show I did last year, and it kind of shook me a little bit. I did it with Tin Can Brothers, who's like a really fucking rad name drop of just these dope ass guys that I love so much, and they're so talented and so fucking funny. And I did a show with them, and then afterwards these 2 girls were sitting there talking to me, and then a bunch of people were sitting there talking to me, and 2 of the people in the group like showed me their heart surgery scars, and they're like, we came because we love you, and da-da-da-da-da, and that rocked me. It rocked me really good. And it was like one of those moments, those life-affirming moments of like, okay. And like one of the people was like, I literally only show my scar because you do. And like that really got me good. That was one of those moments of like, oh, okay, this is why I tell people of this, what should be personal, very intense tragedy and trauma in my life, is because of that, is because of something of like, because it isn't something that should be hidden. It's something that makes you so much you, and something that the world needs to know is like there, and so that was one of those very life affirming moments. And so there are moments like that consistently come up. And even through this, like I've had people that have been like, I have had extreme heartbreak. I've had not the rug ripped out from underneath me. I have had my earth shook, and just like, thank you for still being here. And I'm like, thanks for having me, like very much in that moment. But
the important, I mean, it's emphasizing the importance of connection, your truth, sharing, connecting.
And like, again, so those moments I'm like, yes, there's so much of myself that I do want the world to know and share, because I find a community in it, in a very community-less world, in a very like,
yes,
you know, we're disassociated from so many things. And so I think one of the beautiful things of being online and social media, YouTube, all that, is that you can kind of build this community of people that you truly learn to grow and love and, you know, have a connection with.
Yeah.
And even if your connection is comedy, which is such a beautiful connection, it's perfect, you know? So that's just something that, again, you wouldn't ever get the chance to do or to be. So that's why I do love it. The other side is like truths out there of you that you go like, I wouldn't, do I want to share some of the worst situations of my life ever online? Not necessarily.
Right.
Like that is a heartbreak that I would have truly liked to have been alone in my covers, like, or in my heavily weighted blanket, which I don't love, by the way.
The weighted blanket?
Yeah, I don't love it.
Why?
It makes me feel trapped. Like, it's
you know,
like,
you felt it enough.
I felt it enough.
Yes.
But I told Del, because he was like, he like lives
Yeah,
and breathes.
yeah.
Like, it is like his.
Well, it's
thing.
because
Like, yes,
that
yes,
makes so
yes.
much sense. I mean,
It's a hug without any without any obligation. That's what he literally says. It's a hug without obligation.
That's my least favorite part about hugs.
That is
It's
my
just,
least favorite. And I'm a hugger.
then
I am a lover.
I always owe one back.
Yes.
No.
I need
I
to.
love
I
hugs.
love a hug.
No,
you know I love a
I don't
hug.
mean that at all. I love
I know
hugs.
you do. I know. You're
Well,
a huggy
hugs
guy.
are a little community. I mean,
This
you
is
talk about how important
nice.
community is. I've realized because of the internet, we think we should be making a constant impact on the biggest amount of
Yes,
people possible.
yes.
But what really matters, as human beings, all we really can control is who we're with right now
Is
and who's in our area.
yeah.
And like even why I call this show a service to my community.
Yeah.
That's why I'm doing it. These are the, like, I can't talk to everybody.
No.
I can talk to the people I know.
Yes.
And so I think that's really lovely. I mean, what do you want to do now?
I mean, I told
What
Del,
are you going to do?
What am I doing? I'm gonna do a show. Like, I know I'm gonna do a show. I know I'm writing a show that is a vehicle for myself that literally picks up right in this beautiful moment of having your life totally rocked. Because I think the thing that I have learned is that, like, I am not the only one that this has happened to. And it's like, you know, from every level of it. From, you know, it's like a friend of ours lost her dad last year. And so there was such a weird, like, camaraderie in that of just, like, you've had your world shifted and moved. And I always call it, like, an axis breaker, like, where you're on your axis and it's just like, oh, you're done. Like, we don't even know north, east, southwest. I have no idea what anything is.
Yeah.
Like, I know so many people have experienced that. And that's something that I really want to get into is, like, exploring what it's like when you really are like something that I thought was going this way has been totally shifted. And also really exploring, trying to find that like movement again, trying to find that like humbling experiences and trying to find those things in your life. I think it happens a lot with age as we get older because we have this like idea of where we need to, at least in this industry, we have this idea of where we need to have success. And there's that constant, you know, it's like that quote of comparison is the thief of joy.
Absolutely.
Is so real, especially in this industry.
No one's ever happy after comparison.
No. And
Even if you're on the
doing
good side of
better,
it, yes.
you feel horrible.
Yeah,
nothing
because
is worse
you're
than
reminded
it is,
of where
it
this
is
person
a
is.
perfect
Yes,
quote
yes,
because it
yeah.
really is like even if you go like I'm doing better, then you feel horrible for feeling that, and then you feel if you're a person,
Hopefully, yes. If you're not a
you're not
psychopath,
like,
yes.
Fuck you. Yeah, no, it's like you feel better for like knowing. I mean, it's really that of, you know, it happens a lot as we get older that we're just like I don't know how to feel this way or that way about things, and so I don't know. I feel like the show that that I have been writing and have been doing is like just exploring those things that like make you feel again or, you know, like awaken whatever those things are of like the reason you do the things you do, why you do it, that why is so necessary. And again, no one gives a shit what you do. It's why you do it. And that why was lost for a while for me. That why was very lost. And so I want to explore that again. I haven't felt like I told Del, I haven't felt that since like Iceland was the last place that I went, that I literally was like, oh, I am nothing. And also because I'm nothing, I am
You're
something.
everything. And, well, not only something, everything.
Everything. Yes. And so really like
Right.
those moments I need to explore again. And whether that comes from like, I don't know, you know, going to an NKLA and adopting 72 dogs, which I know that I'm not going to be allowed to do, or just like getting dogs adopted, or like going, there's a really amazing heart camp that like talks about with kids that have like heart problems and stuff. And so exploring that journey, and even just exploring the journey of like why I'm doing what I'm doing and starting there kind of a thing.
Why are you doing what you're doing?
I mean, now it's just to like really let the world know that they're not alone in this. They're not alone in just those helpless feelings, those lost feelings, those everything feelings.
What do you feel like is your greatest gift?
I think it is laughter. I think it's making people laugh. I think it's finding light in situations, in the darkest of situations. I think it's still finding those things. And even Tell and I were kind of basking in this moment of like, throughout all this, it was dark. It was truly, truly one of the darkest times of my life. And throughout everything, I was still cracking jokes and still doing those things, and had that need, that weird need in you of like, I need to find the funny angle in this. Otherwise it's going to end me or just crush me, But I think that is probably my biggest gift, is literally like inciting laughter and inciting escapism in certain things through that.
And how does your heart feel right now?
Good, actually. It feels great right now.
Good.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me talk about 90 million things.
That's all I wanted. No, thank you for being on the show and being vulnerable and talking about the important things.
Talking about the very important things.
Yeah.